So I had this Squire Strat sitting around without any strings, and I was trying to think of an interesting tuning for it. I've tuned in thirds before, which was pretty interesting, so in the spirit of trying different intervals, I thought, let's try fifths? Of course, orchestral string instruments already utilize it, and it exists on guitar when doing a drop tuning. So maybe we should add a few more ideas? I may be trying too much at once here, but let me explain a crazy yet familiar tuning. This is Kevin from Said Too Much. So believe it or not, we are tuned E-A-D-G-B-E, except the octave notation is different. Working with the limitations of how high we could go at this scale length, I first started at the high E and descended in fifths to see what the lowest string would have to be. This turned out to be an F1, a half step higher than a standard bass. I'm no stranger to such low tunings on small scale lengths, so I had no issue here. But looking at the full sequence, F, C, G, D, A, E again, got my brain to want to invert it to the recognizable E, A, D, G, B, E, where all we had to do is add an augmented fifth between the G and the B. In standard tuning, that interval is a half step lower than a fourth, but descending, we need to go a half step higher than a fifth. This way we can try familiar fingerings, even open chords with the new twist maybe? At least that's what I was hoping. The inversion idea also came to me from something called the Chapman stick, which is a tapping instrument meant for both hands. The hand playing the inverted bass register could easily finger voicings where the notes have more space. Instead of a muddy-sounding root, third, fifth close together like a normal chord in the upper register, you can move the third maybe up an octave for more space between notes. Setting up this new tuning was a little more drastic because we're going from a bass E1 all the way up to a guitar's E4 on just 6 strings. So re-intonating required the saddle to go as far back as possible on the thick side. On top of that, we're inverting the strings, so the thinnest string is now sitting in the nut slot for the previous thickest string and vice versa. This required some hesitant widening of some slots, and just a fingers crossed situation for the other. I didn't fill in and recut some of these slots because I didn't want to completely commit to this idea. And playing it straight up didn't feel like I was losing anything drastic for this experiment. Keep in mind, if you wanted to just try inverted fifths, it's gonna be hard to go back into standard. Now the thickest string is 0.90, so I went ahead and ordered a guitar version of what normally is a bass thickness, so that the ball end would be smaller and the taper would start before the machine head. For whatever reason though, I ended up having to use my trick of soldering a solid point on the string after the nut and unwinding it a little bit because the taper just still didn't start soon enough. You could probably drill out the hole wide enough to fit the 0.090 string without destroying the machine head if you wanted a more permanent solution, but again, I didn't want to extremely mod any of the guitar hardware more than I had to for now. So what do you all think? Are such widely spaced chords interesting? Do we require more mods to make this thing actually work? If I'm being honest, playing inverted was pretty difficult. I noticed when fingering bar chords, I guess I usually apply more pressure on the strings at the tip of my index finger, but found the opposite was needed when inverted and had to consciously correct myself. A left-handed person picking up a right-handed guitar is no stranger to this inverted kind of idea, and some even learn to play it this way. It also may have been a little unusual to start experimenting with fifths like this, but I think it was a good point to learn where we might want to go from here with that. Seeing me out for a capo means we probably should go higher. I'm actually really excited about all the ideas this mess of a restringing project sparked. For now though, enough said. For early video access, raw instrument tracks, and more exclusives, find our community on Patreon and consider adding your support.
Said too much.